Please stand by. Welcome to the NSF International Managing Cybersecurity and Business Risk webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Should you wish to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded. I would now like to turn the conference over to Ms. Katie Boone. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Boone. I'm the Marketing Manager here at NSF International for the Management Registration Division. I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to attend the webinar today on managing cybersecurity in business. It is greatly appreciated. Like James mentioned before, we are going to use the chat function for any questions that we have throughout the webinar, so please feel free to use the chat functions and we will answer questions at the end as we have time. There will also be a follow-up email sent to everyone where you can download a PDF copy of the webinar as well as a recorded version of the webinar as well. I'll start by introducing today's speakers. Our first speaker is Director of Custom Audit Programs here at NSF, Tony Giles. Tony is a 27001, 20000, and 9001 lead auditor and has conducted audits globally on information security and data protection for NSF during his career here. Our second speaker, Car Davis, is a managing member of ISMS Solutions, LLC. Along with his distinguished career in the information and online advertising industries, he is also a managing member of ASC Partners, LLC, a Maryland-based company which owns, manages, and services a wide variety of information assets in government, financial, and media transcription and information sectors. With that, I will pass it along to Tony.
Thank you, Katie, and good afternoon, everybody. Cover a brief agenda today about NSF and ISMS Solutions, taking a consistent approach to security reviews, building a risk assessment, security controls you can implement in any business, innovative technology using machine learning, and common security pitfalls to avoid. So some brief background on NSF International. NSF International is a global independent public health and safety organization. We focus on and have been focusing on protecting and improving human health. In the same way that NSF has worked together in the food industry, and the Food Safety Modernization Act introduced risk-based thinking and reformed laws in the food industry back in 2011, NSF wants to continue that philosophy into data and data safety and security. We see that being a main focus in 2017 and well beyond as we see an increase in cybersecurity incidents. NSF International Services. We further our human health and safety mission through providing these services. NSF and ISMS Solutions work together, offering these different service platforms ranging from standards, certification, auditing, conducting audits globally throughout the world, consulting engagements, and training. We'll talk a lot about training and awareness, especially as we get into the cybersecurity and business risk control section.
Hi, it's Car Davis, and I am with ISMS Solutions, as was previously stated. Nice to be with you today. ISMS Solutions was a company that we bought as a result of an incident that we had in another company that we owned. That a company that, like many of yours, is in the business of supplying a good or service. In our case, it was text transcripts. We had a what would have been considered a mistake in data 10, 15 years ago was now considered a risk event. I'll go into it more as we go through our presentation today, but suffice it to say that we felt that the business of helping companies work through these data security issues was something that we wanted to do. The company is both a professional services business as well as a software business. We feel that combined with NSF, a company that is focused on safety and has a tradition of safety, that we can focus in on data safety, which is really where we believe our strong point is, and more importantly, where we believe we can be helpful to other companies.
We look at NSF and ISMS Solutions. We have a very strong partnership. It's been developed solely to help organizations meet information security requirements. This is a full service offering. We see the most common security requirements are tasks that organizations are being asked to meet: ISO 27001, ISO 20000, ISO 28000, and multiple NIST frameworks. We've seen that really pick up in 2017, as well as the adoption of GDPR, as many organizations are seeing moving into 2018. We want organizations to not feel alone working with information security standards, but we want to provide you a single service partner. So we do this through software platforms, on-site consulting, on-site verification, remote assessments, and really cutting-edge machine learning technology that Carr is going to talk about a little bit later on today. We're really, again, focused on offering a full-service information security service platform for organizations.
And the reason that you might do this is not just because you want to keep up with your own safety requirements. Obviously, you want to be able to do that, but you're also going to be sometimes in situations where other people are going to be demanding these safety controls of you. Many of you who do any work with the federal government or have had any kind of work along supply chains understand that companies are demanding this of you. Just today, there was an announcement of a new banking group that just came together. Previously, there had already been one out there dealing with hundreds and thousands of supply chain contributors, and all of whom are going to be required to have some kind of information security. I would say the thing that we'd want you to come away with out of this webinar today is, number one, the commitment to data safety is as important as the commitment to food and water. Number two, that you don't have to be completely certified in this standard in order to have really changed your risk basis with regard to information security. It's not an all or nothing at all environment, and in fact, many of the federal requirements really don't require an actual certified standard, but something that's much more self-certified, and we'll get into that as we move forward into the webinar. The process to kind of get into it a little bit is to really, in a professional services way, deploying technology such that we can really come into your organization, assess the points where you have some sensitivity, and build a platform for you that allows you to take advantage of what these standards are already there to tell you, which are on a control-by-control basis, understanding where your risks within your organization are. All of you who have worked with standards before know that this isn't just a drinking from a fire hose environment. This is an environment in which you will be able to go on a control-by-control basis and actually create a system that allows you to handle what it is that might at first appear to be overwhelming, but when broken down, much like a dance step is broken down within a complicated dance, once broken down, will become easy for you to be able to work with. Our approach around information security is based on as I said, not just the standard, but also around frameworks that have been created by the federal government that allow you to do something that is below the standard, but at the same time, when I say below, meaning something that you don't actually have to be certified to, but allows you to take advantage of all the good thinking that's gone into information security. Here's the example. If you've heard of ISO 27001, you may have also heard of what is known as the NIST 800-171 or 800-53 frameworks. The reason that these have become so popular is because it is a lot to ask of an organization to be completely certified in any particular standard. We all know that. For any of you who have to be certified in other standards, you recognize how burdensome that can be. The government is not interested in having people feel increased burden, but we do all have an obligation to each other to have some information security. And what I really say is, in these situations, it's not when the government put seatbelts in cars that people started to say that lives were saved on the nation's highways. It's when people started using the seatbelts and buckling up. That's what a lot of these controls are, buckling up and recognizing that you don't have to go all the way in order for you to be information secure.
Now we're going to jump into utilizing controls and an approach to security reviews. This is really a behavioral change within an organization, and I really love to grab these controls because ultimately these are controls that are not just IT related. We hear a lot of times in the information security space that it's always IT related. These controls are not always IT. We look at policies for information security, a review of policies for information security, and security and awareness training. The NIST guidelines and the ISO standards provide a starting point for information security controls. They use framework and structure for decision making for information security. Every organization that that Car and I walk into. Every organization that we walk into, they have their own way and their own approach to security controls and how they manage security. The problem that creates for us is we don't really know the benchmarks or the baselines or the starting point for where that organization started their process. The controls provide that baseline, that benchmark, a good starting point for us.
Hey, this is Mitch Mello from ISMS. We're just going to take a brief pause to address the audio issue that we may be having.
Just let us know, Katie, when we're back for audio.
No, we could hear all that. I'm pretty sure I could hear it. I guess I'll pop up on the top right. Is that what Andy's saying?
All right, we think we have audio addressed. So we talked about the utilization of security controls and a common approach with security reviews. A consistent approach to security reviews is a tough task, especially when you look at a big organization trying to build a consistent approach to security reviews. It's basically like you sitting down with 50 of your friends and then all agreeing on the same place to go to dinner, because I think everyone has their own approach to security and everyone has their own ideas that comes to security. NIST and ISO have created the frameworks that are applicable and enable a really consistent cyber risk communication process across the organization. They're repeatable, they're measurable, they use a good guidance framework, and you can start with basic requirements. Start with just building the initial framework. Let's write out an information security policy. Then let's go and do awareness and training and build an awareness and training platform. We want to make sure our staff and our team members are aware and they're trained on the type of data that they handle and manage. Then you can look at things like information classification and layer in the practices. These are the controls. This is when you get more granular in the process and you can look at management direction as it supports security practices. So top-level management commitment, team awareness of security risk associated. And we've put their tasks and we've put the actual NIST or ISO controls related to them in those practices. Then you build out a matrix and managing the control process, what's been implemented, what hasn't been implemented, what's effective, and measuring your progress. These are the measurables that we talked about earlier in security controls. Identify and treat security risks within the organization and be sure that you prioritize those risks based on your organization.
In terms of building your risk assessment, the question really becomes, what kind of risk are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with hazard risk? Are we dealing with financial risk, strategic risk, or operational risk? Or could it be different risks all blended together in an environment in which you as a company have to decide, what kind of risk am I dealing with here? Is it just IT, or am I dealing with my reputation? Am I dealing with other areas of my company that this is going to have an impact on? We all know, as a result of the press, what kind of impact cybersecurity breaches can cause. They can actually have great operational risks for you, but they can also have great strategic risks for you. They can obviously have financial risks for you as well. The idea here is to develop a tolerance for risk that you can actually deal with and develop this for yourself. This is what we did as a company and what actually prompted us to buy ISMS and make it a part of our portfolio of companies. We were in this other business that we were in. We were a vendor to a large multi-billion-dollar company. We had felt that we were along the way to cybersecure risk. We were not as far along as we thought we were. It turned out that where our risk profile was very extreme, particularly in terms of our interactions with this company, such that not only when the problem occurred did we have a operational risk, but there was a real legal risk as well. There was real financial risk for us, not only for our company, but for the company we were working with. The risks around not being cyber secure, not having this information and data safety emphasis are much more wide than you think they will be. And having that understood as to how you will build your own risk assessment within your organization to make sure that you know where this risk lies. That's what this is all about, and that prioritizing of your risk.
So building a risk assessment. There's multiple different ways to building a risk assessment. This is one of the most common questions we asked is, how often is your risk assessment updated? The standard doesn't give any specific guidance. It says planned intervals. But I want you to all keep in mind that risk assessments are dynamic. There's an approval authority that signs off on the remaining risk, residual risk, or inherent risk, whatever it wants to be defined as. Risks are prioritized by high to limited levels of analysis. And again, keep this prioritization and the analysis within your organization. When you look at the NIST or ISO framework, there's really 5 easy to understand functions as they associate to risk. That's identification, protection, detection, response, and recovery. We'll talk a little bit about the risk assessment that's done above, but we always want to make sure that risk is communicated from server room to the boardroom, because any risk to data is really business risk. It's not just, again, not IT risk. But if we look at the identification, protection, detection, response, and recovery process, we identify as a laptop the threat is being lost. We protect that loss through a password process, or maybe there's no password. You need to then implement systems. We move from then building a risk assessment into risk assessment to risk treatment. So we started with a very broad, high-level view. Again, we'll go back to the laptop being lost and there being no password. We analyze that as being medium within our organization. Our CIO is signed off, and we have our risk treatment, the use of a password policy and requirement. We also have a reference to the standards or controls that we use. When auditing or looking at security controls, this reference to the ISO standards or NIST guidelines certainly play a major piece in giving a consistent approach to security reviews. We know that there's a password policy. Even if we look at protection of personal identifiable information and unauthorized access through unlocked cabinets, we've deemed that as a potentially high risk. That's what our Vice President of HR signed off, because it's personally identifiable information. File cabinets containing PII are not stored in open office spaces and are locked. You might put them in a file room, or you might put them in someone else's office. We can also look at unauthorized access to offices, mean no badge system, no door sign-in sheet, or no locked door. A facility manager would get involved. And it speaks to, again, the level that information security, data security, this isn't just with an IT group or an IT system. It's across an entire organization. We want to start with the high level and then drill down from there, and then be mindful of prioritization within your organization.
And it really goes to the point of how digestible these controls really are, and that it can seem overwhelming except when you're actually working with it on a control-by-control basis. If you deal with these different issues on a control-by-control basis, which is the way our software addresses this and the way we address it as a professional services firm with NSF, we can make this much easier for you to take advantage of within your organization than it might appear when it appears somewhat overwhelming at the beginning. Even as you go through this assessment process with these slides, you can see how when it's broken down, you can make the changes necessary to get your company and your suppliers, for that matter, more secure.
So security controls any business can implement. Carr talked about the security controls and what you need to digest. There's 114 security controls in ISO 27001 and 110 security controls in NIST 800-171. Again, those are the initial frameworks that we start to talk about, or the initial frameworks that we discuss. There's common controls across many organizations. Many organizations already meet multiple controls, multiple of these security controls. It's just identification and understanding. A simple controls matrix can help you understand where you already meet controls, and you're on your path to developing what's called a statement of applicability, which is a requirement of ISO 27001.
And what you're going to see when we show you some technology, it's even going to make it easier than it's ever been before in terms of taking advantage of getting your own organization qualified for this kind of work. So we're going to show you that, and we think it'll even become more apparent to you how easy it is deploying technology to help your organization be compliant, whether you go all the way for a 27001 or you're working within one of the frameworks. I think this might be a good time to, if there are any questions, we might take some from our listeners.
Had any questions come in besides audio?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? If you can't hear.
Yeah, but I think that we fixed the audio issues, but there have been no other questions come in. If anybody has any questions, again, remember to use the chat function on the bottom left-hand of your screen.
All right. So seeing there are no questions at this time, we'll certainly address them at the end. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to be able to ask any at this point.
Oh, that's the flag. Got it.
Continuing on with any security controls any business can implement, there's really 5 things to consider when developing your security controls matrix, and that's how they relate to your business. Security controls are a starting point. They're a starting position for that organization. They give everyone check boxes or at least an idea of something that others have already thought about or others have already experienced. So that's a great starting point for most organizations. It's a structured approach to see what applies to you and what doesn't apply to you. And we go through these security controls assessments very often, and we hear organizations say, yes, I meet this, yes, I meet this, yes, I meet this. And then we get into something like multi-factor authentication, and they say, oh, we need to look at that. Let us evaluate that one. So there's always one control that, again, someone else has thought of, or at least someone else has had an experience with. But 5 things to consider is what controls apply to me. Many organizations don't have to do or don't offer development services. That control could be not applicable or excluded. The risks. What is your largest identified risk? Is it a loss of data, or is it a physical access breach? Is it a machine in your operation, or is it files in a cabinet? What is it that you're trying to protect the most, and how have you rated that risk? Do I have an information security policy, and have I followed it? Have I provided my team with the right awareness, training, and information for security? People are still the largest risk to information security, and we see that consistently, and we'll see that throughout this process and as we get later into the slides. And how have you conducted an information security management review? Have you identified any gaps? Are you aware of any gaps? So the first 3 controls I really like to start with are an information security policy. This is just a set of policies or a policy that's been reviewed and approved by management and communicated to the team. Communication is critical in information security practices and processes, and it really helps an organization migrate towards full security control implementation. You have to make your team aware, and then you also have to educate them. Another control we see on here, awareness and education. We need to communicate and inform the team on security practices. We need to document that training's been completed. And then really one that's fairly straightforward, but sometimes it's not as physical and environmental security. Prevent unauthorized physical access to your facility. But keep in mind there's delivery areas, loading areas. Any unlocked door could potential physical and environmental security risk. We move through towards more detailed controls, and here's where we get a little bit more granular on this workflow. As I mentioned, there's 110 to 114 controls, and we get into equipment security. This is prevention of lost or damaged, compromised access, a clear screen policy or a clear desk policy. Is cabling tied up into ceilings where we can't see it and it's not lined across the floor? A personal favorite is backup information and protection against lost data. There are organizations that are constantly backing up, and there are organizations that have never experienced a system crash. So if you don't back up and you have never experienced a system crash, you're extremely lucky. Most of us have all experienced a system crash, and we are very happy that we have those backups in place. And really we want to be compliant with contracts. Understanding contractual requirements, and many customers are requiring processes on data security and having practices in place around data security. So understanding what those contract requirements are and what you've worked on or agreed to with your customers.
And I'm just going to echo that same point as we think about these business controls that any company, any business can implement. In manufacturing, for example, the risk of this unauthorized access. And you can read these, but I will zero you in on this issue that Tony just mentioned, which was the issue around compliance with customer and supplier contracts. So much, as we know, in the business of information security is tied in with how companies interact in that supply chain. What used to be something very, very fundamental has now become something very, very complex. The requirements around your contracts with companies that you work with, notwithstanding your own focus on information security within your own company, your biggest companies that you work with may have a very, very different idea of how compliant you as a company need to be. You need to become aware of what your contract says, and you need to be able to focus in on going through the controls with regard to your own information and how it impacts the company that you are working with. People can lose contracts, lose money, lose opportunities as a result of not being compliant with what they are being asked to do on behalf of the people that they serve. Not just their own customers, but the vendors they work with.
So this is where we really get into working from point A to point B. It starts with control development, it starts with leadership commitment, and that really supports security compliance. We want to work with organizations and understand what controls work for those organizations. They should all be designed and prioritized based on the data and information that your organization is responsible for. There's a lot of controls that we can help with. It's a team approach. It's one of the reasons why NSF and ISMS Solutions works together on information security platforms and helping organizations with information security. Find the errors and build from there. But control development and leadership commitment really drive home and support security compliance.
Now you may ask yourself at this juncture, you say, well, it's true, but with 114 controls, plus I'm already having to be compliant with other standards, how am I going to keep track of all of this? This is very burdensome for me. Is there any technology out there that can help me keep this all organized so that I can deal with hundreds of controls, possibly a situation where I'm dealing with hundreds of vendors, and the possibility of dealing with several different standards or assessments that you might have to go through? And the answer I'm happy to report to you is yes, that there is good technology, and one of the reasons we've come together with our partner NSF is to really create for the market and for you some innovative technology. Here's one example, is our example of dealing with the documents that you'll be having to upload as a part of a questionnaire. Obviously, these controls are oriented toward asking you questions. What is your access control policy? What is your information security policy? What is your policy with regard to mobile devices? These are all questions, and in a situation where you're not organized, you might find all of that information quite overwhelming. In this environment, what we would do is to allow you to be able to ask the questions, but then also be able to compare your documentation with a reference document to actually have that document that you've uploaded scored against what we have decided to be a very good document. This allows you to really keep your own house in order and make sure the policies that you've uploaded are appropriate. And it's scored automatically using artificial intelligence technology. It is the kind of thing that really allows you, and for example, anyone within your organization, to focus on the less mundane aspects of your information security and allow you to focus in on the most important things that it must be done. However, these policies do need to be actually looked at to make sure that the policy is correct. Example here, we're going to upload a document, and here it's not a dynamic demonstration for you, but what I'm going to show you is that we'll be uploading documents, and then we will go to the next slide, and we'll see that we've actually graded the document. We've actually scored the document. This is the next one. And you'll see in this case, we actually have a low scoring document, which means we have a problem here. Certainly not meant, nothing nefarious has gone on. Nobody has decided to put up a document that's not appropriate. It just happens to not be the right document as scored against the reference document. Now the question is, can we do better? Are there other documents that we might be able to upload that would be more appropriate and such that we can keep track of it? And the next slide will demonstrate that once actually we've demonstrated that once uploaded, we can do another document and get a very high score. That would be a document that we would know that we could put to the side as not being a red flag, not being a problem. But as you can imagine, going through 114 of these will allow you to make this a very streamlined process for yourself as you gather, put together, and aggregate all of the policies required for you to either get through the NIST framework or for you to get a 27001 audit done within your organization. And at the end, what you'll need to do is to make sure that you have a ledger. Here we are deploying very modern technology around this, blockchain technology, that is a good place for you to be able to keep track of everything that's gone on within your uploading and downloading process, or I should say your uploading process of these documents, and the scoring that had to go on to make sure that your documents are in good shape. That's all through a blockchain ledger, and that's some of the technology that we're deploying together with NSF to come to you with something that really takes the burden off going through something like this. If you're going to make this happen, you have to make it as easy as possible. The deploying of artificial intelligence technology and the deployment of blockchain technology allows you as a company to say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be under the burden that I thought I might, having to deal with these dozens of controls, particularly in light of, I would have to imagine that most of you on the call are already going through some kind of assessment one way or another, either a food assessment, a water assessment, or anything, a 9001 quality assessment. It's all hard. It's all viewed as being difficult. It's all viewed as being red tape. We understand it. But in this case, you're dealing with safety. We want to try to give you the tools that make it easier for you to maintain these kinds of documents and get through this process.
Absolutely. We really like the innovative technologies we build upon the continued machine learning and blockchain ledger for control of documentation and uploading of documentation, but really avoiding the pitfalls. We talk about this. Use a team. Don't go at it on your own within the organization. Use everybody within your organization. We used references earlier that talked about a VP of HR or a facilities manager, as well as your IT team. Develop security documentation that meets standard requirements. More importantly, know the framework that you're using and be able to talk to that framework. As I said earlier, if you can point to the guidance by NIST or ISO in security controls, you're already starting to meet those requirements. Awareness, training, and education. Supplier security reviews. And again, we couldn't hammer more on team awareness and communication. Continue to communicate information security and information security assessments throughout your organization. For organizations out there that are up against upcoming deadlines, the most common requested frameworks and most common questions that we receive, there's been significant adoption to NIST 800-171. The enforcement date is ended this year. The General Data Protection Regulation, enforcement date in 2018, and ISO 27001 is continuing to grow and expand as more organizations are requesting ISO 27001. Know these goals and milestones, and again, understand the interest in the framework. When we look at general data protection as we move into 2018, this is going to apply to so many different organizations, and it's protection of personally identifiable information. So it's anybody that has any personally identifiable information housed on their team within their office.
And you can see that, I mean, in this chart here is and of course you know this from your own reading, that the costs of data breach can be so high, and in so many ways they're not actually quantifiable in the ways that some of these charts do. For example, if you should lose the confidence, for example, of a vendor, and there's been a data breach, in the ways that won't show up on a chart like this, you're going to be in an environment in which that customer, that vendor that you're working with, is just not going to be able to have the same level of confidence in your ability to deliver, which means the next time your contract is up, you're going to have a much more elongated negotiation process, and there's certainly going to be an environment in which they're going to want to shift more risk to you than you would normally take. It means increase in insurance costs. It means increase in the time that it takes to negotiate your contracts. There's a lot of cost associated with data breach, sometimes more than just the ones that you think that are the most apparent to you. And the day that you, and I focus on this because I think it's very important, the day that you as a company working with another company drop the ball with regard to information security is the day that you as a trusted vendor are looked at in a different light. That's why it's very important to think about taking the necessary steps. But what have we learned? very important to recognize that it's not all or nothing at all, that you can go through this process without having to go all the way through to a certifiable standard. Maybe the NIST framework is appropriate for you as a result of being able to comply without having to go through a certification process.
We see a continued use of different tactics and different breaches across 2016, 17, and we'll see this landscape continue to evolve. This is constantly evolving and always growing, but breaches featuring hacking. There's low-tech, very low sophistication of hacking tools that are becoming more and more readily available. We look at malware and the increase in phishing attacks upon an organization. Don't always click on that link that comes across in an email. Don't always click on like those are potential phishing attacks that can put malware onto your machines. Social attacks, really that has to do much more with a physical environment. And then even actions involving just point blank brute force physical actions or privileged misuse. There's also weak passwords. We continue to see a lack of password management policies or no changing of passwords. We always want to keep our passwords in mind, and our passwords, we always want to make sure they're tied to a specific user. We continue to go towards the end of the webinar. If there is any follow-up questions, or if anyone is interested in a live machine learning demo from the innovative technology that's being rolled out on the security controls process or a security controls assessment, please contact Elizabeth Haney. Use the code CSWebinar to get a discount. Feel free to reach out, ask us any questions. We are more than happy to help.
Well, we certainly are, Tony, and glad to be able to spend some time with you all on the phone on our webinar today to be able to hopefully shed some light on what is clearly something that's in the news every day, but maybe can become overwhelming in terms of thinking about your company and the policies that need to be deployed. I think we're well equipped to be able to help you, and we welcome your inquiries. And any questions?
Again, please use the chat function as we don't have the audio turned on, so if you do have any questions, please use the chat function in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
And any questions that get asked that we don't get to on the call, we'll be more than happy to follow up on with email and continued communication. Please reach out and don't hesitate to contact us.
You can see that Tony and Mitch's contact information is available here on the last screen, so be sure to make note of it. I will definitely be passing this along to everyone and that was registered or we send the initial email out to, so you'll be receiving this information.
We did get a question. Will this be part of an IETF audit? I don't necessarily know how IOB or the different IETF offices are going to employ data protection or information security processes. This has certainly been something that we've seen more common come up in the automotive industry. We've seen different organizations ask for, and we have real experience with organizations asking for suppliers to comply to information security practices. I don't know if it's necessarily on an IETF or IOB level yet, but I think we will see a continued focus on data and information security. All right. Are there any websites that has a list of new internet viruses that are being used by hackers? There's a lot of different websites out there. Symantec is something that you can look at. There's another one. We can get some information over to you on the different sites that are available. There's an interactive demo on a website organization by the name of Norse Corp that provides live attacks, and it provides IP addresses and open internet ports that are being attacked. So those are different services that are out there. You can always reach out to Microsoft with their patching updates as well. There's so many different websites or Google alerts that you can set up for different breaches or attacks. We keep an eye on, and one of the things referenced in this presentation was the Verizon Data Security Breach Report, as well as the Verizon Data Security and the Ponemon Institute report.
Well, if nobody else has any questions today, we want to thank you all for participating in the webinar. And again, I will follow up with you guys later on this week with the PDF download as well as the recording of this event.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you, Carr.
Thank you very much, Tony. Katie, thank you very much.
I think we're all set, James.
Thank you. That does conclude today's webinar. Thank you for your participation.